This day in sports history.
Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
A wild final 15 in the NFL in 2007, the Euros got even in 2012, and Major League Baseball's longest winning streak. And nope, it wasn't the Yankees. Hey, it's This Day in Sports History, a daily look at what happened in years past in the world of sports. This podcast is a member of the Sports History Network. It's September 30th, and on this day back in 2007, the Detroit Lions put together a final quarter for the ages. This was the 2-1 Lions hosting the 1-2 Chicago Bears in a Week 4 matchup. Both of these teams had been on the losing end of lopsided losses the week before, and they were in need of a rebound game. This was a pretty pedestrian game through 3 quarters, with the Bears leading 13-3. There weren't many indications about what was on the way in the final quarter of play. Lions quarterback Jon Kitna got the scoring started right as the quarter began, throwing a 4-yard touchdown pass to Sean McDonald. That was followed by a Lions pick 6 on the next Bears possession to take a 17-13 lead. Devin Hester then took the ensuing kickoff back 97 yards for the score, and the Bears regained the lead 20-17. 3 yards and a cloud of dust had turned into a drag race on the Bonneville Salt Flats. Kitna led back-to-back Lions scoring drives, putting 14 more points on the board. The Bears had turned the offensive reins over to Brian Griese after Rex Grossman had struggled against the Dallas Cowboys the week prior. Griese didn't have the best day, throwing 3 picks on the afternoon, but he did drive the Bears down the field and throw a touchdown pass with 52 seconds remaining to make it a 3-point game. The Bears had no choice but to onside kick it. And not only did the Lions recover, they did this. Here's Dick Stockton with a call for Fox Sports that day.
So here we go. Robbie Gould. And the kick picked up by Fitzsimmons. Fitzsimmons down the sideline. Casey Fitzsimmons into the end zone for the clinching touchdown.
The Lions won 37-27, and it was the 3rd time in Lions history that they had returned a kick and an interception back for touchdowns in the same game. The 34 points the Lions scored in the 4th quarter are the most by one team in NFL history in the 4th quarter. The combined 48 points scored by both teams in the 4th is also the highest in NFL history. On this day in 1945, it was Hank Greenberg providing the firepower for Detroit. Of course, Greenberg played baseball for the Detroit Tigers, and this was the final day of the 1945 season. The Tigers and St. Louis Browns were set to play a doubleheader on this afternoon. Greenberg's Tigers were in a tight pennant chase with Washington. Detroit was in the driver's seat with a 1-game lead, but if the Browns could steal 2 from Detroit on this day, then it would force a 1-game playoff. The Browns had a 3-2 lead in the top of the 9th, but the Tigers loaded the bases with 1 out, and into the box strode Greenberg, a man who had ended his 4-year military service just 3 months earlier. He sent a Nels Potter pitch deep into the seats down the left field line, just inside the foul pole for the dramatic grand slam home run to give Detroit the 6-3 lead. St. Louis could not scratch for any in the bottom half, and since the Tigers now had a 1.5-game lead over Washington, there was no need to play the second one, and so they canceled it. The Tigers went on to beat the Chicago Cubs in the World Series in 7 games a few weeks later. On this day in 2012, it was the Europeans returning the favor in the Ryder Cup. Back on the 26th, I talked about the greatest comeback in Ryder Cup history when the U.S. battled back from a 4-point deficit in the final day singles matches to win back in 1999. Now, 13 years later, it was the Europeans who entered the final day of play 4 points down. And just like the Americans did in '99, the Euros got off to a great start, winning the first 4 matches to square it and then 3 of the next 6. One of those first 4 matches was Ireland's Rory McIlroy versus Keegan Bradley. Rory got a little mixed up with his starting time, and he showed up only 10 minutes before he was scheduled to tee off. Without any time on the range and barely swinging the golf club, he went out and he beat Bradley 2-1. When Martin Kymar rolled in a 6-foot par putt on 18 to beat Steve Stricker, the Euros got to the magic 14-point plateau to retain the Ryder Cup. When Tiger and Francesco Molinari halved the final match of the day, it was the Euros winning 14.5 to 13.5. The win was an emotional one for the Europeans, not just because of the huge come-from-behind win, but also due to the fact that this was the first Ryder Cup played after the passing of Spaniard Seve Ballesteros, who had been a key Ryder Cup player and coach, and he was an inspiration to all in his battle with cancer. After the win, European captain Jose Maria Olazabal said, "Seve will always be present with this team. He was a big factor for the event for the European side." On this day in 1916, it was the end to the longest winning streak in Major League Baseball history. Now, you might think that the longest winning streak in baseball would come from a powerhouse team like the 1927 Yankees. That's not a bad guess. A team that dominated throughout, turned a couple of games lead in the standings to a double-digit one, but you would not be correct. It was the New York Giants who started their amazing streak back on September 7th of 1916 when they were dead last in the National League, 14 games back in the standings. They reeled off a string of 26 wins, with the only interruption a 1-1 tie on the 18th. They swept the Phillies, the Reds, the Pirates, the Cubs, and the Cardinals during their streak. On this day, they were playing a doubleheader with the Boston Braves, and they won the opener 4-0 to get to 26. In the second game of the day, the game was tied 2-2 after 6, but Boston exploded for 5 in the top half and hung on for the 8-3 win to snap the streak. The old mark had been 21 games set back in 1880 by the Chicago Cubs. The 26-game winning streak is still the Major League Baseball record, and yet, surprisingly, that streak did not put them at the top of the standings. Instead, when the streak ended, they were still 7 games back, and they finished the season in 4th place. The closest any team has come to equaling the 26 consecutive wins are the 2017 Cleveland Indians, who won 22 straight. And on this day in 1972, Roberto Clemente picked up career hit number 3,000. It would be his last hit of the season, and unfortunately, also the last hit of his career. The 37-year-old Clemente finished the season with a .312 batting average. He was a 12-time All-Star, and he won 12 consecutive Gold Gloves for his dazzling work in right field. But he died 3 months later on a charitable mission to Nicaragua. The plane carrying supplies he'd purchased went down in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Puerto Rico, killing Clemente and all aboard. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? The world's longest mountain chain is mostly under the ocean. The mid-ocean ridge is almost entirely beneath the sea, stretching across a distance of more than 40,000 miles. It's said that this mountain chain is less explored than the surface of Venus or Mars. That's all I've got for you today. This and every episode of This Day in Sports History is researched, written, voiced, and produced by me, Steve White. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.